And Brooke, an opening karakia, please.
Pakataka te hau ki te uru, pakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ke uta, kia mā taratara ke tai. Ihi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, te hei mauri ora.
So, welcome everyone. Cole, are you sitting in for Andrew? Can't see you tucked away over there. Take a seat next to Peter. Okay. Okay, we'll move to apologies. So we've got Andy Baker, we've got Maria, Alan Cole, and Eugene is an apology for lateness. I don't think there are any other apologies. Okay, I'm happy to move receipt of those. If we can have a seconder. Thanks, Angela. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. You're a non-voting member, Angela. Just so I'll get someone else. Me and Mike. Mind you, I might be one of those too. Eventually. Okay. We'll now move to item 3, confirmation of the agenda. The agenda is as circulated. There were no changes, Robert?
No.
Okay, if I can have a mover and seconder for that, please. I've got Liz, I've got Mayor Axel, seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. And we'll now move on to any disclosures of interest. There don't appear to be any. We'll move to item 5 on page 7, and that's the confirmation of the minutes of our 20 February meeting. Are there any matters requiring clarification of those minutes? There are not. If I can have a mover and seconder for those. Thanks, Mayor Axel. A seconder. Looking at me and Mike. Nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we'll move on to item 6.1, which commences on page 17, and this is Robert's quarterly update. Robert.
So this is a quarterly update of the work that your teams have been doing in the background to support implementation of the future-proof implementation plan. You'll see that, as we've discussed a couple of times in previous committee meetings, we've been detuning a lot of our implementation activities given the resource demands created by the fast track process on your teams. So we've been focusing on the activities that we can advance with the resources that are available to us, but not, there's a number of projects which you'll see as grey in my report where we're not progressing at the moment due to those capacity constraints. Just highlighting some features out of my report. As I say, there's a little in the report on page number. There's a reference to some work that the transport teams have been doing together around the Cambridge Local Service Study, which is funded out of future-proof budgets. And as part of delivering of our broader Metro Spatial Plan transport business program business case investment program. So you hear a lot about the work we do in Hamilton. I kind of wanted to highlight that there's work we're doing also in other parts of the future-proof partnership to help plan for the future needs of our communities, both in the North Waikato and supporting the efforts of Waipa District Council in terms of the work in Cambridge. And making sure that we have that kind of modal choice we're looking for from our transport network as our communities grow. And the other bit I highlight in my report, and you'll hear us talking a bit about it as we go through some of the other reports, is the RMA spatial plan changes, the introduction of spatial planning, and the transition activities. So this is a risk to our delivery of our implementation plan that we've discussed at the Chief Executive's Advisory Group. I thought it was just appropriate to raise it here. If nothing changes and the Select Committee reports back at the end of July with no changes to the RMA planning legislation, then you will have, as a region, 18 months to prepare a regional spatial plan. Isn't a lot of time, particularly because unlike what we prepared with the FDS, there's immediate legal effect and consequences of what goes into a regional spatial plan. It directs the contents of your single regional combined plan. So it replaces the regional policy statement and ultimately will drive what will replace all of your district plans. So it's a pretty important document. The minister, I got a hold of a letter from the minister to Smart Growth, where he emphasised that it's not a rinse and repeat of your future development strategy. He expects more work to be done and it to cover different material, more of the rural integration kind of stuff and issues that we've talked about as future-proof in the past. How do we think about the whole of all of the districts that are part of future-proof, not just the urban growth component, those kind of things. And because the regional spatial plans, if the legislation doesn't change, also incorporate a path to designation, then there'll be quite a lot of infrastructure providers which will be saying, well, give me my designation through a regional spatial plan. I won't require as much effort to get a designation as I would if I had to go through a full designation process. We can expect that to be quite a contested process with a lot of submissions. So I think last time, for those of you who were on the committee, we had a day and a half of hearings and deliberations on the FDS. You won't be getting that this time. And it's challengeable through a judicial review process. So there's a rights of appeal of a sort. So there's a lot of work to be done. 18 months, as we've all said in our submissions, is incredibly tight to do that. The government hasn't made any changes. What I figure is your decision making of those 18 months, we can expect 6 of those months to be gone in hearings times and decision making and your endorsement of decisions as individual councils and all that sort of stuff. So you've actually only got 12 months to prepare a regional spatial plan. So we're watching it, watching what the changes to legislation go. We'll report back with your chief executives through other forums on what the region's plan is to manage those risks. My focus is on making sure the work of future-proof is evidenced enough that it can be rolled into components of that regional spatial plan so that we can hand you over a product that is transferable. And we'll talk about that with the North Waipa work later in the agenda. That's my report.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions or comments. Mayor Axel with the Chief Supporters Group to my left here.
That's right.
Go the Chiefs.
We were somewhat misinformed as to the degree of commitment from other partners, but we remain Chiefs mana strong in the Waikato, just making that point. Robert, your comments just now on the regional spatial plan, thank you for those. When I look at that reassuring green colour on the on page 21, that says you are fully resourced, your budget is well under control, and you're on track for delivery of the regional spatial plan. Would you like to rethink either your comments or the colour?
So we're on track for delivering what future-proof needs to deliver into a regional spatial plan. That's what that colour refers to.
But would it be fair to say that there is a significant amount of work that partner councils have to do, which you're not reflecting on?
Correct. Yeah, I'm reflecting on the future-proof work program and what it was intended to provide into a regional spatial plan process.
A really good answer. And we'll pick up on the green, if I may, under the agenda item for affordable housing when we get to that. But
okay.
Just picking up on that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? regarding Robert's report. Just one thing I'll let members know, so it's no surprise. I've been engaged outside of my future-proof role to assist Taituara, the local government. Well, it used to be called the Local Government Society of Managers, and along with New Zealand Planning Institute, to do a series of road shows throughout the nation with a particular focus on the regional spatial plan. So my focus is more on the governance, creation of committees, process agreements, and NZPI is on the detail in terms of regional spatial planning, preparation, etc., and development. So those road shows, which obviously have a focus for local government staff, commence on the 1st of July. Notwithstanding, we are all awaiting for the Select Committee report on the resource management reforms, which is due apparently on the 26th of June. So we'll see how that unfolds. So, but picking up certainly Axel's point, there'll need to be a fair bit of activity in quite a reduced period of time, if the time frames that are currently in the legislation in the bill do not change. Okay, Chair Warren.
Thank you, Chair Bill. Yeah, Robert, just an indication around the timeframes for that case that the chief executives have asked you for obviously that small piece of what's got to be a regional spatial plan encompassing the whole boundary of the region as it exists at the moment.
So the transition plan, so the plan for the transition needs to be done, I think it's by September, and then we have whatever projects spin from that. By then, hopefully, we'll have some clarity about what the region, how the region is planning to prepare the regional spatial plan, because I don't know what else might be asked of future-proof until we see that project plan kind of come through. So I'm trying to get a little bit ahead, but not so far ahead that we start doing stuff that actually the mayoral forum turns around and says we don't need you to do.
So you're reporting back to the CE's group in September? Or
Come hear them too.
Yep. And so if I'm reporting back to them in September, that means any report out of that would come to you at your November meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If there are not, we'll move to the recommendation to receive that report. And if I can have a mover and seconder for that, I've got Mayor Tim, seconder for that, Chair Warren. If there's nothing further, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And also forgot to recognise Mayor Ash is online. So welcome, Mayor Ash.
Morning, everybody. Representing the Mighty Chiefs. Looks like I've got a bet on with Chair Warren. $20 coming my way, Warren. Have a great day, guys.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we'll move to item 6.2. That's agenda page 25. And I'll welcome Jim and Vanessa to the presentation table. I'd also like to, they've both been intimately involved in this work. I'd also like to acknowledge Nicola Leonard, who's one of the colleagues who's also contributed significantly to the development of this work. Robert.
So I won't say much. I'll leave it to the team and yourselves to put them to the test. This piece of work comes from the future development strategy. Key piece of action was to understand what we should or could be doing in that North Waipa, South Hamilton area in response to a range of development proposals that we were seeing come through at the time we did the future development strategy. I suppose this is a bit different from our normal approach to planning for industrial land, which is to kind of just put a big pen around it and say, here's general industrial, we'll zone and hope that good general industrial turns up in this place. What we're trying to do here is work with the developers to see what we could do together to optimize the economic return to the region as a whole by coming up with an agreed master plan and looking to locate activities that generate higher value and benefit from association with the airport precinct. So it's quite a different approach. It's a bit more hands-on in terms of us working with the development community to come up with a plan for how we might move forward. And that becomes important in the context of a regional spatial plan, because in my head, the recommendations of this report turn into a map that shows this area and says, here's a particular economic development node that's of significant regional significance and that we will work to promote development of and to get the right infrastructure in place to get this piece away. So that's kind of the role of the regional spatial plan. And off the back of that, just playing through how this is all supposed to work in the new system, that would direct the people preparing your combined plan to put in place the appropriate zoning to drive that economic development, and also to consider designations for the key infrastructure that might be required to get that underway, be it wastewater or water supply, transport corridors, that kind of stuff. So this is kind of a foundational input that would be recommended to the regional spatial plan. If it's accepted, would flow through into the combined regional plan with hopefully uncontested zoning off the back of that. But over to the team.
Okay, so Jim and Vanessa, anything you'd like to add before I open it up for questions?
Is that picking up? It's right. Okay. No, I don't think we have too much to add. I mean, I was just sort of thinking to myself, there's a lot of technical work sitting behind this that if you're interested in, or if anyone's interested in, there's a lot of information, a lot of what we found out about environmental constraints and, specifics around economics, transport, et cetera. But there are some really key headlines emerging from this around the strategic priorities, particularly for the next 0 to 10 years. And that's comes through in the executive summary and also in the cover report. So I won't go through that, but just reassuring you that while it may seem like common sense at this stage, it's really built on a very solid technical foundation. And also we've got some really good momentum now, not only within the future-proof partnership, but with those, the development and landowner community, those conversations starting to happen through this project in a coordinated way, which is why one of the key, most urgent recommendations is to move forward with economic hub symposium and then some precinct master planning based on that.
Okay. Okay, questions, comments? Chair Warren.
Thank you. Yeah, just around that 0.5 and the economic hub that you've just outlined. Where's the resourcing coming for that?
Might be a question for Robert. Yeah.
So by resourcing, you mean the resourcing for the infrastructure to make it happen and things like that?
Yep.
So we would assume that's
Secretariat,
comes.
et cetera. Yep.
Oh, right.
Well, yeah. I'll let you start with the infrastructure.
Yeah. Start with the infrastructure and stuff like that. We would assume that the development community would be funding that.
Yep.
Unless it's things like Hamilton Southern Links. In terms of if you're going to the idea of the secretariat, well, we haven't actually got an idea of a secretariat in there at the moment. It's Waipa District Council staff continuing to lead through with the implementation under a future-proof umbrella is what it would probably look like. Because there isn't a lot of resourcing to be done.
Set up the symposium, et cetera. I'm not sure if he's aware of that.
Could be, look, we haven't got that far. It's a really good question. Future-proof does have budget that you could use for that kind of setting up a symposium. Depends what we really mean by scale of symposium. I'm already aware a number of the developers are keen to get things going. So it might well be that the development community funds that symposium. That's my first, they came to us, that would be my first thing. Cool. help us out here.
I just think it's one of those things, and this sort of thing that needs to be identified, and where it drops into budgets, etc., relative to this forum and or external. Thank you.
Mayor Axel.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, nice segue, and I'll take $20 too on those things. Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, one of the summary comments here in the report, Jim, is that this is an economic opportunity of national significance, and I agree with that. So the overall question, I've got a couple of subset questions, if you like, but the overall one is, are we really matching the pace of delivery from our side with the, to match the scale of this opportunity?
Well, look, I think if the region was asked to do a regional spatial plan 18 months ago without this work, I think it'd be quite challenging. I think the pace, what we've done over the past 18 months is quite significant. And so the question, what I hear in your question is kind of a question around the pace of what's to come and the urgency with that. So from a technical and officer standpoint, and I guess what we're asking you all to endorse is a sense of priority and urgency around this opportunity and a clear pathway through the regional spatial plan.
I think that's a fair point. And do you think we need to turn our minds to whether we are simply planning for growth, or whether there is an opportunity that we should explore around actively enabling growth? An example of that might be, you've talked about the opportunities around rail, around the wastewater plant that's going to that area, the runway extension and so on. I mean, those are opportunities to, build it and they will come, as opposed to just being enabling when they do.
Through the chair, I mean, I think as Robert has said, this is not first and foremost a strategy to add more land to land supply and then hope that will result in something. Really, it's about focusing the investment, focusing on the opportunity that's here, the unique opportunity in relation to the airport, and ensuring that, as you say, that the infrastructure that needs to be there is delivered, but in particular that the development that comes is matched to those unique opportunities.
And if I may, just a couple more. That's a nice segue into talking about the amount of industrial land, and this report identifies a shortage potentially of industrial land, which is sort of a little bit at odds, I think, with our overall regional view of how we've identified that capacity.
I think in the future development strategy, we have a short to medium term shortage of industrial land in the Hamilton area. That is why one of the reasons that a bunch of those fast track applications, or all of the fast track applications, seek to provide industrial land, because we don't have a shortage of housing land, we have industrial land. In this case, there's quite a significant amount of the industrial land that's encapsulated in the FDS is in this strategy. So all the airport zoned industrial land forms part of the strategy.
So how much would you look to unlock, do you think, as part of what's identified?
Additional over the 50 years? Vanessa, is there an actual number?
Clarify that we do not add any industrial land on top of what is already provided for. The economic hub is mainly building on from Mystery Creek event zone and the airport business zone as well. There are signals of additional industrial land, either through the future development strategy, through plan changes, will have been put forward. So all of this have been signaled as possible industrial land already. The only lot that is looked at and hasn't gone through any statutory process is probably the Puawai possible precinct development. but we're not adding on top of what's already in the future development strategy. Yeah.
Right. So we're not really addressing the identified shortage in that sense. Okay, that's interesting.
Sorry, could I just, on that last point, not adding to it, but making sure that the best use is made of what's there. And that relates in part to ensuring that industrial land near the airport, as much as possible, is tied into those unique advantages rather than the general industrial that could happen anywhere.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And finally, you've identified a number of potential delivery mechanisms, including sort of conversations around the special economic zone and so on. Which do you think, to use future-proof speak, which are the transformational ones, and what will be the resource required to actually achieve that?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so you've got a number of potential delivery mechanisms that you've contemplated.
Mm-hmm.
Which are the ones that might actually be worth, putting Warren's $20 on?
Yeah. I think that the study is really trying to not predetermine this, and at the sub-regional level, it will need to be a collaborative decision. Obviously, the ideas that have been put out there have not all been tested within the New Zealand context. There is appetite, I understand, for the special economic zone from the central government, and that could actually be an area to test such mechanisms as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got Mia, Mike, Liz and Angela in that order.
Thank you, through Chair Bill. I'd look just back to Chair Warren brought up about the funding piece to this, and I guess just having a heads up, because on the implications one sort of needs to know. So in terms of time frame around that, what are you looking at? I mean, you talk about developers, but someone's going to pay for this.
Yeah, so the immediate actions in the strategy really are about a symposium, which is the time of people getting to talk together. So I wasn't in my head imagining that was a kind of $1,000 a day event kind of thing. I was thinking it's actually just fancy word for us getting together in a room and continuing to talk to the developers about what those aspirations are, which is why I said it's staff time, it's in-kind contribution. There's no immediate expectations from what I've read in this of new investment certainly in the LTP period. That's what you get out of the next stage with the developers. And quite honestly, I think our job is, and this goes back to the line of questioning from Axel, our job is create an enabling environment on the basis that the developers are pulling together to deliver the kind of outcomes we want. So we're more in an advocacy space. So, if special economic zone became a solution that was worthwhile, that's more likely to be advocacy to the government to change regulations, because we've already got an enabling planning framework possible under the spatial plan. And any new infrastructure is either Hamilton Southern Links, or it's the wastewater treatment plant, or it's water supply, which is all growth pays for growth, developer funded or NLTF funded, not us funded.
Right, and Robert, just the time frame around the symposium, when do you think this
So reflecting on the role of this work in the regional spatial plan, I would be saying, if you were happy with the idea of us continuing that conversation with the developers, start now, build from there, and have something done in time to confirm exactly what you want the regional spatial plan to say. So going back to you've functionally probably got 12 months to get your spatial plan ready after August, next 12 months.
Thank you.
Liz, then Angela.
Yeah, no, I'm really pleased to see this is in its final stages, but I'm just thinking about Southern Links and the commitment now we've seen from NZTA, which is very positive. Long time coming, but it's positive. And look, given the significance of the Southern Links with the spatial plan, I'm just wondering about how future-proof mayors might be able to keep that continued pressure on with a public statement, and perhaps it's through the future-proof website, but a collaborative, statement around, the importance of that Southern Links project and the importance of it to this spatial plan. It's just pressure, it's ongoing pressure, it never hurts. It's just a suggestion. But I just see that particular key piece of infrastructure, roading infrastructure, is just going to underpin that spatial plan and just, provide certainty for developers that, but a commitment from NZTA on timing of that delivery of the road would be helpful as well.
Thanks, Liz. We'll pick up that suggestion. Angela.
Yeah, just following on from Liz's comments really around Southern Links, I think it's important to understand as well the phasing and staging of that project as well. The State Highway 21 link with the new Narrows Bridge, wherever that might go. That's really important as a first stage of that project. Alongside, workforce access through PT or other modes as well. The rail piece is really interesting as well. So, keen to maybe get Kiwi Rails, see where they're at on that, and what's possible in that space as well. So, really agree with Liz's comments that through the next RLTP and NLTF that we do see, really pleased with the 100 mil for pre-implementation, but what's next? So, keep the pressure on.
Okay. Chair Warren.
Thank you for my second crack at this. Just going back to your 5 priorities, and number 4 was prioritise high productive land and peat mapping. Have you identified gaps in what regional council already has in that space? Because we have quite a comprehensive, highly productive soil mapping done and peat land mapping, so I'm not sure why that's a priority.
That's really to kind of start integrating that piece of work within the spatial plan to really understand the constraints and the environmental limits. So it's not just about containing that map, but rather to kind of integrate it to the regional spatial plan.
Yeah, so we already have that information though, so I don't think it's a piece of work that needs to carry on. It would be something that we would input into the regional spatial plan.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and look, my earlier comment just about resourcing and funding is just sort of with note 2 of the motion before us, and just concerned that by approving that we're not looking at approving funding to go ahead with these priorities. It's something from a councillor lens that you tend to look at rather than potentially a project reporting lens.
We'll make a change. That's a really good point, and it needs a subject to funding addition to the recommendation, which Brooke is just beavering away at on the screen at the moment.
Okay. Mayor Ash.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So comments on that. I hear the word enabling, and I'm all for that, and also all for cutting red tape and bureaucracy. I thought it might be worth, when you're talking to the developers, identifying the problems that they face, especially dealing with developments. Case point in that, when we're making people, spend 3-4 million putting in a back flight path or something like that, where nobody's actually seen a bat, is, it's borderline for me. The other thing is the airport's important, and obviously there's a lot of growth going on there. There's great things going there. We're a shareholder in that. But also probably identifying other areas that could be also developed for industrial, maybe not, concentrate all the eggs in one basket. I'm thinking, up northern end of T Strait or somewhere like that. You guys will have the better knowledge around that, but it also protects some of the heavy industry that's already out that area. So I think it's about identifying other areas where industrial growth could go as well. Okay.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you. And great to be with you this morning, sitting in a different part of this room than I previously sat. Really significant that you noted the transport issues associated with this neck of the woods. Fundamentally important that you don't also forget about water and wastewater in exactly the same context. this area is a bit complicated because the strategic intent of servicing it for wastewater was through the Southern Wastewater Treatment Plant, which your way is progressing. But of course, we are precluded from providing retail services to developers and anybody else in Waipa District. We can provide bulk water and wastewater services, and there's a negotiation going on as we speak to try to sort out the terms of that between us and Waikato Water. But we need to make sure that as the thinking about this progresses, we have a joined up lot of thinking across the whole lot and don't just assume that in particular wastewater services can be magicked up to provide the level of growth and servicing that is expected or implied in the vision that's in this strategy. Thank you.
You want to comment?
That's why we're proposing we move to the next stage of a bit more detailed master planning, because it is, I think the thing to also remember, and we need to keep bringing ourselves back, this is a 50-year vision. So we're not expecting all of this stuff to happen in the next 10 years, although expectations from the development community may be different. But those infrastructure constraints are the key things we need to highlight. Like, this vision can't be achieved without Hamilton Southern Links. So if Hamilton Southern Links is delayed, then the implementation of this vision will be affected. And likewise, if we can't find suitable wastewater and water supply solutions.
I think the mismatch of the timelines between the authors of this work and the local authorities thinking about timeframes and developers was understated in what you just said, Robert. There's a marked difference between developers that want to see things happen now and a 50-year timeframe, and that tension will become more acute as we take each step.
Eugene.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just don't want to labour on too much about the Southern Links because it's already been mentioned, but just, you know, how do we work close with NZTA around that? So just thinking about the Waikato Thoroughbred fast track proposal and the interchange, and sort of seems to be a change in the designated land area to the new NZTA's idea of where that would be, and just the massive impact on the local road network with you know, the future of thoroughbred racing in that area is really important. So sort of getting a little bit uncomfortable that NZTA is designing stuff in a silo a little bit, and we could miss some really good opportunities. So I'm not sure where the platform is where we get around the table and talk to them more thoroughly in that space, but I do have some concerns here.
Cole, would you like to comment?
Yeah, through you, Chair, just to sort of, reference that our staff are working with the wider fast track team that has been set up through Future-Proof, and I'll certainly reflect some of those comments back today to our design team and fast track reps on the Future-Proof fast track coordination team, just to run that alignment and make sure that that is being picked up. But just to reassure that we are involved in the fast track and are connected with our design teams as well on that work. So
yeah, that's good, but it's what's happening. It's not sort of feeding back to that there is thought around it. It sort of seems to be reasonably, this is what it is, and this is it. You know, this is where we think is best, and without considering, you know, that fast track and that thoroughbred, and also the impact on that local road network is going to be disastrous, really, if we don't get that right, the placement of that right. So,
through Chair, thanks for raising that today. Certainly we'll take that back with the team.
And just as a suggestion, perhaps some of that reporting back could go to CAG first, and then ultimately around this table. So thanks for that, Cole. Now, Mayor Mike.
You know, really just off the back of Eugene's thing there around Southern Links. And just, we're the only ROM that just got approved some money in the latest budget. So I'm sort of conscious of that in the Waikato. And my understanding is Southern Links is going to be funded differently though, as opposed to a road of national significance. But different funding options, different funding pathway. Is that correct or not?
So no funding pathway has been confirmed yet. I know different funding pathways have been explored. At this stage here, as been mentioned, we've got the 100 million that's been confirmed, and our next steps are around acquiring, designating the corridor. But at this stage, we don't have the funding confirmed for construction, but this pathway's been explored.
Right. So, but just in terms of, because this all sort of ties in together. No big piece of infrastructure can happen without the other. And I guess my concern is $1.8 billion has been pumped into sort of expressway here. Is that going to be detrimental to Southern Links? Because Southern Links is set down for 2035 or around or beyond, or is that correct? Just thoughts. I mean, you're not the government, but I'm just concerned that because a lot of money's been spent here and there's a whole lot of other RONs, none of them have been picked up, that are we really going to get two bites of a cherry in quite quick succession?
Robert, do you want me to answer, give you the political answer, Cole? So NZTA will have to make their prioritisation decision based on the merits of the project. But I think from my perspective as your advisor, it is reasonably likely that only part, if any of Southern Links gets funded to implementation, only part of it gets funded, like one of the stages. Just because the NZTA are running out of money to fund all of the RONs, and a lot of the other ones stack up for their communities in the same way as Southern Links stacks up for us. So in the way NZTA prioritises it, we'll probably try to be fair across a lot of the country.
Yeah, and just through you, Chair, I suppose we've heard some of the signals around current affordability and in terms of those investment cases across the RONs, they've been developed to try and demonstrate the benefits of each to help with that prioritisation. And obviously starting to get some of those signals of around prioritisation of the RONs and those RONs that develop the, I suppose, most bang for buck in terms of benefits.
Just before I go to Angela, I think also one of the benefits of the regional spatial plan approach is and it's part of the expansion of the role of the spatial plan, is the connection in A, to funding, B, in terms of the regional spatial planning, providing some very clear input, obviously into the regional transport strategies, but also at a national level in terms of the government policy statement on transport. So in terms of those connections, I think will be critical, Mike, in terms of trying to get things anchored from that local or regional perspective. I've got Angela.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. I'm just wondering, given the level of interest in Southern Links, whether we could have a more focus on it moving forward.
I just texted Lyndall that we needed to get them on the agenda for the next EPIC meeting. So we'll make sure we get a full briefing. We are also, as your technicians are doing work on, Hamilton Southern Links as it's conceived today by NZTA is just a corridor project, whereas Future Proof has always looked at it as a network with designations which were to be delivered by Hamilton City for local road connections and a whole lot of other things. So the technical team are also working on a network plan which documents all of those other interventions, including public transport interventions, that would be necessary to make sure that when we get Hamilton Southern Links, it does what we intend it to do.
Because a network plan underpinned the
expressway. We used a network plan in that way with the Waikato Expressway, just to make sure NZTA, when it was prioritising projects, understood that there were local authority funded projects that were important if they actually wanted to achieve the outcomes that they think they're going to get from building an expressway.
Mayor Axel.
Yeah, thank you. Just really endorse that and reinforcing comments made by Deputy Mayor Patterson that, we were really surprised to see the previously designated interchange, changing from a full diamond to a three-legged monster, 10 metres above the current grade. So it'd be really good to have an input. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendation. I'll just note also one of Jim's recommendations that airport shareholders confirm our expectations. I've uncharacteristically made a bit of a nuisance of myself talking about the airport extension and the importance of it, the runway extension, but I think it's important for the shareholding councillors actually to speak clearly through Sean, I think manages our communications. So I think we should just be really clear on that. So thank you for raising that, because it's we've been sort of fairly benign in communication, I think, in the past decade or so to the airport. So let's be clear on the importance of our intentions as shareholders for the airport. So with that, Chair, I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, just on that, Mayor Axel, I was just going to suggest in terms of 2 in the brackets, if we delete the words any amendments and so it's in brackets just says subject to funding, and that's picking up Chair Warren's point earlier on. Okay, if I can have a seconder for the recommendations, please. Liz? There's no further discussion on that. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And just again, acknowledging all of the team in terms of that work, but also, as we've discussed, the importance of it as a foundation input into that regional spatial planning work. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's 6.3 on page 28, and the infrastructure alignment across the partnership. Robert.
So in the future development strategy, last time around, we identified all of the infrastructure which was necessary to deliver on the settlement pattern. So to deliver on the planned for growth areas across all of the partner councils. And within that, we identified a subset of those pieces of infrastructure, which were critical infrastructure that were absolutely fundamental. If we didn't build these things, we couldn't accommodate the planned growth. Absolutely couldn't. And so you'll see on paragraph 7, there's a list of pieces of infrastructure which are related to that critical infrastructure list. And most of them you are making progress on, which is really good. So there's a lot of work being done, for instance, on projects like the Eastern Transport Corridor at Ruakura, on planning the rapid public transport network that we will need probably from years 10 to 30 of this investment cycle, Cambridge to Pierere, and Hamilton Southern Links and projects like that. So we're doing pretty well in terms of delivery of it. There are some that at the right time of writing were unfunded, and I'm going to put my hand up now and confess to an editorial mistake when I was editing this document that somebody else prepared. When we talk about the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant, that should have been the Northern Water Treatment Plant. So that was the idea at the time that we wrote the FDS, that we would need to the north of Hamilton to accommodate the planned growth in North Hamilton. We would likely need a new water supply plant. So a new take and new treatment plant to supplement the one South Hamilton. And that is where we were got. The commentary is actually right, although it refers to Pokeno and Tuakau. That is not on the books at the moment. It would be developer funded is the current thinking, as I understand it, of the people. So I got a bit carried away and thought that was about the Pokeno and Tuakau and North Waikato growth. Peter might want to clarify some of that. I'll talk about the other ones and then throw to Peter. Te Kowhai water and wastewater, that's subject to a developer delivering that. The Northern River crossing, it was alluded to in Hamilton City Council's long-term plan, but unfunded. But now as fast track developments come, it's going to become increasingly necessary. And so I'm sure Hamilton City Council are probably having a think now about what they need to do in order to influence how the fast track process works and how much developer contribution we can get from the fast track developers for the Northern River crossing. And obviously Anglesey Street as a, or more to the point, a solution for public transport within the Hamilton CBD area is a piece of work that is actually underway. What's not committed at the moment is the actual funding for the implementation of whatever that looks like over the next 10 years. But it's being funded through IAF grants given to Hamilton City by the government, by the previous government. So the investigation work is underway, but the implementation is not. Sense.
Thanks, Robert. Peter.
So I think, Robert, you were traversing the north of
North water
north of
treatment, and then maybe a conversation about North Waikato as well, with all the growth you've got going on there.
So in terms of water supply, we are acutely aware that we need to solve some fairly fundamental problems with the Huntly water supply, which turns brown and smells at times of the year, which is completely unacceptable. We also need to address security of supply issues in Ngarawahia, where the water take is in the river is not a very safe place to have a water take, and high risk that it gets taken out by trees coming down the river and other interesting things like that. And in the longer term, in the more strategic sense, we need to address the amount of water supply and availability for the north of Hamilton. So there is work underway currently to look at the opportunity to bring those three things together in a coordinated and larger solution. We haven't got to that solution yet. And beyond that, in terms of the north of Waikato district, there is substantial emerging demand for both wastewater and water supply in Pokeno and Tuakau, and active discussions with developers about how to fund a wastewater solution. If we proceed with that, it is most likely to unleash sufficient demand for wet industry that water supply will be the next immediate problem.
Thanks, Peter. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to pick up on the MSP corridor funding, and probably just ask a question around, is that implementation or is that planning for implementation?
So this refers to the partially funded, refers to the planning for implementation. There is a much more comprehensive program that the Regional Council and Hamilton City in particular are funding now, which are kind of like the small steps, you know, the changes to the bus contracts that WRC is in the middle of. And then there'll be some infrastructure to help the new networks that are created in that contract change operate efficiently. That's all part of council LTP processes at the moment. Okay. And quite a lot of good work being done at a technical level to get alignment across. Well, I'm thinking MSP, and I didn't mention it before. So the transport program business case, that's our long-term look at what is the transport network for the metro area. So that's from Huntly, Te Awamutu, Cambridge, Morrinsville, Hamilton, look like, has been endorsed now by Te Waihanga as whatever the first step in their approval or endorsement process. That's the Infrastructure Commission as a good study, and one that the government can make investment decisions in support of implementation. And it's been picked up in the most recent version of NZTA's Arataki, its long-term strategic view, as as the long-term solution for managing the growth of the metro area. So it's quite neat to see the technical work of this partnership being endorsed at that level, which will help us with investment conversations in those programs going forward. No doubt.
Excellent. Yeah, just wanted to reinforce that, their bus services plus the bus infrastructure do need to go hand in hand. Otherwise, if we look at Clyde Street in particular, we've got 20 bus movements an hour, but so many constraints. Yeah, so through the next LTP, we just need to make sure that investment is aligned across councils, so that we're not putting on more bus services to then get stuck in traffic.
And I think it's either to your September or your November meeting, we'll be coming back to you with a reflection on what that joined up program of investment looks like.
Mayor Mike.
Thanks through the chair. Just a question for Peter, really under item 8 there on page, what are we on, 31. For the future development strategy that's been compiled back in 2024. Just give us a bit of a take on how EOY and Waikato Waters are sort of in your collaboration together. There was talk about systems and that sort of thing, like computer systems and some alignment for a future possible amalgamation. Just want to know whether it was all talk or whether things are actually progressing in reality.
Hey, Kia ora. There have been a number of engagements and discussions. Waikato Water is in the process of standing up the same core systems as we are. We've started in different places. So Waikato Water started with finance and ERP. We started with asset management and GIS. I think it's fair to say there was a lot of conversation prior to Christmas. Since then, both organisations have been rather focused on how to stand up on the 1st of July. And in particular, Waikato Water has been through a fairly long recruitment process. So the people that we will need to engage with will be different in a month's time than the ones that we have been talking with. We are certainly committed to developing things in a way which would make joining up easier later, and the approach that we've adopted at EOY of using shared services from the two councils means that we have yet to make any of the bigger decisions around business systems and so on, because we're relying on those provided substantially by Hamilton and billing from Waikato District.
Thanks for that. It's good to hear that it's sort of begin with the end in mind is at the forefront of what you're thinking. Thank you.
Eugene.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is just more of a comment. I've raised this in other forums, but the Northern River crossing. So, that's a very important piece of work, and the so HT1 was part of HCC, WDC's agreements. Those things will all change with amalgamation, etc. But the impact of out of sequence that Fast Track is creating, this is a really good example. Orchard growth in that space is 11% of the whole HT1 network. Under previous agreements and understandings, is once HT1 was triggered by the city, it required the Northern Crossing, which is a massive, costly project. So this work, 11% of HT1, and maybe, I know we've got both councils working a lot and around roading networks, but there's huge impact in the Te Rapa in the north of the city and in Horotū now, and so the impact of the 11% of that will be quite significant. But just a lot of concerns that we've got to make sure we get those roading networks in through that area on point, because there's still another 90% or 89% to be developed.
Yeah, so one of the pieces of work that we've commissioned is in order to support your advocacy into the fast track process is a a piece of transport modelling which turns all of the fast track applications on and sees what happens to the network if they all fill up. And I'm expecting that will show the network in Hamilton goes to severe congestion without the Northern River crossing being turned on with the fast track alone. But we'll wait and see how the modelling goes.
That's probably already there now. You know, River Road, Horatu coming back into the city is really congested now. You know, in the morning and evening traffic, it's going to be a big issue.
The challenge we have with the fast track applications is the applicants don't believe they need to consider those cumulative effects. They just need to deal with the effects of their individual applications. So that's why I'm doing the modelling. So I have some evidence to what, as Peter and Tim were saying, seems self-evident evidence to support our position, and that actually there are cumulative consequences here that need to be considered.
Okay. Blair, I didn't see you over there.
No, that's okay. I just was listening to Eugene's comments and just really for the table's knowledge, from July, subject to our annual plan being signed off, there is budget for work to start on the Northern River crossing designation process. That's been a project that's been long envisaged and deferred, but the money is in the budget, subject to it being signed off. It's a multi-year project, but obviously with the fast track application and HT1, as you note, having some clarity on that designation is becoming critically important. So, and of course with in Hamilton side with Fonterra, the plan change 17, and that route being also rapidly planned, we need to move forward with that process. So to your comment, Eugene, it doesn't include funding for bridge construction, but it's certainly the planning work and just to try and identify and secure a corridor.
Okay, thanks, Blair. Any other questions or comments? Mike?
Just a comment. I'm just, look, Peter, it's great to have you here and thank you for being here. I'm just wondering at certain times whether Waikato Waters shouldn't be here also.
There's a standing invitation for them to nominate someone. They're still employing staff. I have a feeling that, well, so one of the government officials that used to turn up here on behalf of Kaingaora is moving across to Waikato Waters, and I suspect he'll turn up as our representative.
Perfect, thank you.
Very soon.
And that connection into future-proof, not just around this table, but also around the Chief Executive Advisory Group table too, Mike. Okay, there's no further questions or comments. You'll notice on the screen recommendation 2, which is not in your agenda. So it was a discussion I had with Robert yesterday because I felt it was a good report, highlighted key issues around funded or unfunded projects. So we've put this up for your consideration, and essentially it's the Future Proof Implementation Committee recommending to Future Proof partners. And when I talk about Future Proof partners, it's also includes the water entities, including NZTA, consider the importance of the investments as outlined in the report we've just been talking about for implementation of the future-proof settlement pattern as part of their consideration of long-term plans and funding programs. Rather generic recommendation, but it's just so we're not losing sight of in terms of what's in this report. So it's not highlighting any project in particular or any particular partner or agency, but really just saying don't forget in terms of settlement pattern, and it needs at some point all of the component parts to be there for it to be fully implemented. So that's the reason for having that recommendation. Okay, I'm happy to take someone to move and second recommendations 1 and 2. Eugene, me and Mike, any further discussion? I'll put those. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 6.4, affordable housing, endorsement of next steps. And there's a report on page 32. Robert, Harvey, would you like to join the table? Over to you, Robert.
Right. So this is a report that Future Proof co-funded, really looking at if we've got KPIs and measures and targets within the Future Proof strategy, what are the actions from our perspective that might be required of the partners in order to achieve those strategies that go beyond just providing land for housing. And so we worked with, Harvey, I'm going to forget your organisation's name now. It was Waikato Wellbeing Waikato. You switched to deliver the piece of work, and it sets out some very good recommendations. They are actions which in my view, are not ones that Future Proof as an organisation needs to lead. Our role is to support the Waikato Housing Initiative and Wellbeing Waikato with the ongoing implementation and to pitch in as advocates where we can to help. So that's where I'm seeing our work at the moment, unless FPIC push us to go away and do some more thinking about things we could do. But I'll pass to Harvey if you want to say anything about the work, Harvey.
Welcome, Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I've presented to just about everyone in the rest before, so I won't really.
You were here in April, I think.
Discussion. No, and I just acknowledge Rob and thank Future Proof for funding the work. I think the question is, well, the next point is these are great ideas. How do we do them? And that's really, I think, something that we are thinking about and looking at with people like WHI and others. We've had a look at some of the initiatives in terms of costing from, I think, when I was here in April, and we think they can be done for less than we were talking about. You might have remembered, I think, Maria, you made a mention about the website, which had a 6-figure sum on it, and we've had someone look at that, and it's actually almost already done. It doesn't really need a hang of a lot to get it. I just keep thinking from the point of view of who's the audience. Who are we actually trying to communicate here and make sure it's really simple for them? So at the end of the day, we've done the work, but I actually think this work belongs with the WHI as the regional leadership group for housing in the Waikato, and they are the front door in terms of where this sits. So all these products, I hope, will sit with WHI, and they will then be the group that advocates and promotes and works with people around this table to make that happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Harvey. I'll open it up for questions and comments. Table. Mayor Axel, I see your finger moving.
I was just leaving space for somebody else to button first. Yeah. Look, thank you for the work. Thank you for the report, Harvey, and it's really great to see that we continue as a partnership to focus on this. A leading question, Robert. I wasn't here in 25, but I'm really keen to have an update on the 25 KPI targeted numbers in our list of key performance indicators to demonstrate success. We've got some 2025 numbers on number of affordable houses constructed. I actually know the answer already, but
You're ahead of me, so away you go.
Well, we've fallen woefully short, is the short answer, and that's not the fault of Future Proof. It's not the fault of WHI or Harvey here with the same mission but a different cloak. But the point is, we've set some targets for ourselves. We've failed to achieve them, and not just by a little bit. We've not really made material impact. So looking forward, because we are where we are, what is it that we need to do? This is one of our transformational moves. What is it that we need to do that is transformational? That's the core of my concern, I suppose. So then turning to the paper in front of us, we've got some actions here Action 1 less than 10 grand, 2 less than 10, 3 less than 10, 4 very low. Well, let's just do those. You know, the longer we spend talking about it, we're already costing more than cost to do them. So I suggest we just endorse those. I do have some questions, Harvey, and it's on me. My bandwidth has been very compromised by the Head Start work that's elsewhere, but the housemate platform sort of leaps out at being a different level of investment. So I would welcome your comments about the impact that you see that making for the investment being asked. That's my first question.
Yeah. Thanks, Axel. Through the chair. As I already indicated, we had a look at the housemate platform, and we've actually already partially developed it. It's actually already a website. The AI tool already exists. And so we're speaking to web developers now about how we can do that for a hang of a lot less than the rough first estimate was. So again, it's yeah, we're talking in the low tens of thousands rather than 200,000 as the cost to do it. I don't really think that's the point. The question is, where can it be housed so that people will use it? Because there's no lack of cool jazzy toys around that nobody uses. So that it really comes to that front door point that I was making before. I think that's the really important thing, that there is a coherent agreement in terms of, if we're thinking about whether it's people who are looking to buy homes in the Waikato or develop property, or from the point of view of council staff who want to understand the development economics of housing development, where do they go? And I think getting that clear is really important. First of all, I mean, in terms of scale, Axel, I mean, the Housing Equity Fund actually is a mountainous order of magnitude bigger than anything we're talking about here, and it's on the scheme. And I think Alistair is talking to you today. You know, so we've tried to keep these things at the simple to implement, relatively low cost scale.
Yeah. So I'm certainly of a mind we should support what's in front of us, but I fear it's not enough to actually make an impact on our own already adopted targets in terms of additional supply coming on at that affordable price point. I would think actually, Mayor Mike, there's probably a bit more added in your area than anyone because of a particular developer who's getting on with it, which is great to see. But what do we need to do? And that's the challenge. And who leads this work? I mean, I see you sitting there by yourself today, Harvey. I mean, we are not leading it. We are relying in partnership on others, including WHI. So how do we progress from here? How do we look at inclusionary zoning and some of those other things which we've already identified ourselves as being the levers we control? We are not going to start building housing ourselves. None of our councils have funding for that or appetite for that. But we have some levers that make it easier for others to do so. Just seems to me that we're hands off on those levers still. So that's a challenge, I suppose, to us all. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, Robert.
I'll just pick up on the measurement component. I have got the team at Hamilton City Council at the moment helping me out to produce a dashboard indicators, which will be able to go on the web and which will be reported to you, in which you can see how well or poorly we're doing against those targets. But you're right, the current results aren't shifting the dial with what we're doing at the moment. And that's part of what I was looking for this report. Is there anything else we can do? And I think there are some ideas in there to pursue. And then we get to is it WHI? Is it Waikato Wellbeings? Is it the Mayoral Forum? Is it Future Proof? Who's the lead in this? Because it's not doing the delivery of that kind of stuff is not clearly in Future Proof's mandate. So there's a big conversation lurking in there.
And with respect, without pretending I have a crystal ball that I don't, what is the shape of Future Proof beyond Head Start?
Yes. Yep. Okay, I've got Angela, then me, Mike. Okay, me, Mike.
A couple of things. I'll start off. I'll pick up after Axel actually for a start. Yeah, and I guess where councils have got land, and you often have to purchase land with these subdivisions for infrastructure, etc., and there can be then spare land at the end that wasn't needed for the infrastructure that is sold, say from council's point of view, to subdividers or whatever. But that bridge concept, I've sort of been thinking about it from a bridge housing concept, which is over in sort of Waipa way and other places.
Just down the road as well.
Yep, up the road here. Is taking that land and that long 125-year lease model of not selling the land, but just generating the lease, so the councils do have income, but it makes it far more affordable to actually build on and therefore borrow because the lease is so long. So I sort of looked when I listened to Simon Perry and Jen and thought, oh, councils can actually really directly help here. We can go and identify bits of land that we could put up for this sort of thing, talking to folks like yourselves and bridge housing, etc. My other point is this. I'd like to say I heard it from Treasury, but I'll be making it up. I probably heard it on Mike Hosking, but I did hear the other day that house prices, we've had the biggest slump in house prices in 50 years. Since 2002, the trajectory's been going backwards in terms of average house price. So is that in itself, I looked at some of the stats in here, around the 6.4 ratio of income to the average house price, and it's pretty tough. That trajectory coming down, surely that's going to help folks get into affordable housing. Just ask your point of view on that.
Yeah, through the chair. Yes, you're right, Mike. And from memory, the worst slumps have been in Wellington and Auckland, relatively speaking. I think the changes in the Waikato and Hamilton have been less. And that's probably a reflection of the fact that there's still plenty of demand and excessive supply for people to be here. I think the question really is the long run trajectory, and not getting too focused on any little blips along the way. There are there's plenty of commentary out there right now that maybe this is the end of the golden weather in terms of housing being the sure thing on investment. And I think I'm old enough to have heard that before. I would be wary. I think I would always ask the question, what's the structural drivers here that really make a difference? And I think in the previous report that I made and presentations, these are useful secondary actions. That's what I call them. The primary actions are a competitive land market through the RMA reform and affordable infrastructure through the new vehicles that are out there to do that. Those are the big wheels that'll make a big difference. And then, models like bridge and, having some sort of a perpetual funding vehicle to recirculate funds to produce housing where the market won't necessarily do it is really important too. There's no silver bullet here, but there are some big ones.
Chair Warren.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. Harvey, just following up on Axel's points and just running through that action plan list, and what's been completed and what hasn't, just for my information, is the affordable housing handbook, there's the new housing affordability model, the patterning housing book. So just trying to get my head around, because I know in the other piece of this, there's pictures of those. So I'm assuming that potentially they are already out there.
They're done, Warren. We've developed them to sort of like a first version level. And there's not a huge amount of depth behind them yet. So we've created the first draft of them, if you like, and they're perfectly good in the sense that you can read them and understand what they mean. But if you take something like the feasibility calculator, which Veros produced on Excel, that's not a particularly helpful platform to be sharing with everybody. So that needs to be web enabled so that you can just go on to it, put your factors in, and it produces a result without you being able to get in there and actually muck around with all the codes in the background. And the cost we've had a quote from that of between 5 and 10 grand. It's quite minimal. And I've actually spoken to the Gallagher Foundation about whether they could fund that. So it's not big money.
Yeah, so just through you, Chair Bill, I'm just wondering, picking up on Axel's comments earlier about, what funding could be, forwarded from this organisation, etc., to help either build on what's already there or that. It's not sort of quite clear here, and whether that's a resolution for today or another day.
So the chief executives are in September going to be prioritising my implementation plan for the next 12 months, and then they'll be bringing that back to you. So you could ask the chief executives to ask me, or ask me directly to consider using some of the future-proof funds, future-proof cash budgets to support this work program, if that's what you wanted us to do.
I think, Robert, it'd be good just to get clarity from Harvey, and maybe not right now, but you know, over the next short-term period on, you know, what would be helpful in this space that you've indicated here, potentially to help shift these forward, as sort of Axel's alluded to. So maybe that's an action for Harvey to take away and bring back to yourself.
Mr. Chair, if I can suggest, what I don't want to see happen is for Wellbeing Waikato to become a default second housing leadership group for the Waikato region. Success for me is that the Waikato Housing Initiative successfully takes these and a range of other actions forward as part of its business plan for the next 12, 18, 24 months. And Lale's not here, he's actually busy building affordable housing. But my suggestion would be actually I talk to Lale and WHI, and then we present how WHI's work program would look for the next 1 or 2 years, and what the budget for that would be, and then what help Future-Proof could potentially offer. Then there's some framing about it.
Yeah. And I think, and Harvey's picked up on it, but in terms of them having the discussion with Robert, so when he brings back that implementation plan, there's some thinking already developed, Warren, and also some options around potential funding. Okay. Anything else in conclusion, Harvey, while you're here?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Very grateful.
Okay. No, thanks very much. Robert, anything to?
No, nothing more from me.
Okay. So we have 3 recommendations before you up on the screen. And obviously there'll be some more coming back when we consider the implementation plan and the discussion that we've also just had on this matter. Leah.
Yeah, I just wondered whether I might just offer an observation from our council on what Harvey's raised. I think there's some really important things there. There are things that we as councils are all individually doing. I guess the trade-off or challenge that each of us face is who pays if the councils do step in to intervene in this way. So in the Hamilton case, we've got a few examples. We have sold some land in North Rotorua called Area Q, where we sold it with express condition that there need to be affordable homes developed as part of the development. Now that resulted in a market price which was less than full market. We achieved a good outcome, about 15% of affordable homes. So there was a financial impact. Second example is our endowment fund has invested by way of loan $10 million with Bridge Trust to develop the apartments down the road and down Tristram Street here called Hinimo Apartments, and they are, me and Tim attended, and they're very close to opening. But that's been achieved by the endowment fund taking a sub market return. So basically a cost of capital return on interest only. So that's an endowment fund which is designed to actually target market returns. It's been a deliberate decision of council. Council does have not much, but some land. In fact, some land is going to council next week for sale in Peacock. But of course, the challenge for council is that same land is being sold to offset the cost of developing the Peacock area. Now, it could be retained for purposes of housing and the method that me and Mike described. But there's also the other side of the equation, which is the desire to reduce debt and to reduce the impost on ratepayers from cost of growth. So I think it's just the challenges in terms of how we can think about our tools. And so there are many other things that we can do, and equally, I think as staff provide advice to council, we are always looking for those opportunities, but equally mindful of financial situation and the rates keeping environment we operate in, that the council needs to trade off when they're thinking about if affordable housing requires support, who's funding that support, and what cost is it the ratepayer, is it the development community? So I just offer that as some of the considerations and the trade-offs that are real that we face.
No, thanks, Blair, for that. Mayor Axel.
Yeah, thank you. I'll do my repeat my trick from before and move the recommendation, but make a comment on the way through. Just responding, Blair, to your comments, I think the answer is, who pays? The answer is we all pay. That's the bottom line of housing distress, housing vulnerability in our communities. Actually, we all pay if we don't make progress in this area. And I think your earlier presentations, Harvey, make that point clearly. Right now, the top three vulnerabilities, as I remember your report, housing vulnerability, food insecurity, and energy poverty, are the three key things that hurt our communities and disproportionately hurt parts of our community. And hence why we focus on it. And I do reflect on the frustration of this persistent problem that started back in the Waikato Plan days down the road at across the river in the old regional council buildings, and I was part of that myself. A succession every 3 years of new mayors, new councillors making the same commitments, and nothing actually happened in terms of housing availability at that affordable end. So it's on us. It's on us.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Axel. You've moved the three recommendations. If I can have a seconder for those. Thanks, Mayor Tim. There's nothing further. I will put those. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And at our next meeting, and as Robert's outlined, there will be some reporting back on those matters that have been raised today. Thanks very much, Harvey. You're welcome to stay on for the next session, I'm sure. And I'd like to welcome to the table at the end of the room, Alistair Rhodes from Bay Trust and Roy Thompson from, I think it's New Ground Capital. Welcome to you both. And just a wee bit of context, after our last workshop where Harvey and Lale presented, I thought it was opportune time to have a presentation in terms of on the Bay of Plenty Housing Equity Fund. It's just another opportunity in endeavouring to address affordable housing issues. So Alistair and Roy were intimately involved in the development and establishment of the equity fund, which they will talk about in a bit more detail in a moment. But certainly wearing another hat as a Tauranga commissioner, again, at that point in time, very supportive of the initiative. And before we left as commissioners, we contributed 20 million to that fund. And it's certainly much bigger than that, which Roy and Alistair will talk about in a moment. So hence the reason that I sent an invitation for them to come and present to us this morning. So on that note, welcome to you both. Your presentation's been circulated to all of those around the table, and we also have Mayor Ash from Matamata District Council online. So I'll hand over. I'm looking at you probably, Alistair, to kick us off.
Kia ora koutou, ko Aotea Chief Executive of Bay Trust, Chair Bay Plenty Housing Equity Fund, or Alistair Rhodes tōku ingoa, nau reira, tēnā koutou katoa. And it's great to be back in my old stomping ground. I spent the first 17 years of my life in Hamilton, so it's great to be here, coming over the hill and seeing the beautiful kind of sunny vista we've got in front of us today. And suspiciously, I feel there might be a rugby game in the weekend as well. So unfortunately, it's not in Hamilton. It's actually in Wellington, but I imagine a few of you going up to the game as well. So, best of luck for that game at the same time. So I also want to introduce Roy. He's the Managing Director of New Ground Capital, which actually manages our fund as well. Roy, you want to introduce yourself?
And you press your button there, and the red light should come on the right-hand side. Yep.
Apologies. Kia ora koutou, Roy Thompson. As Alistair mentioned, I'm Managing Director of Newground Capital. We're an investment management firm focused on the origination of impactful investments based in Auckland. But we've been involved, as Alistair mentioned, in the co-design and management of the Bay of Plenty funds since, I guess, mid-2021.
Yeah, so what we're going to do today is just talk a bit about I just noticed beforehand you're talking about affordable action plans. So taking it from action plans to actual delivery and making a real meaningful difference in our kind of communities. Bill, did you say we've got about 20 minutes for this presentation? So this is
flexible. So
this is an area we're both really passionate about. We were kind of thinking we had an hour until we read the agenda. So we're going to try and shorten this down quite a lot. We've got some slides here which are kind of more prompts for discussion, but we really want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions and answers as we're going to go through this. So we're probably going to flick through these slides relatively kind of quickly. Just going to myself give a bit of a background about the fund setup and structure, what we're actually doing, and then Roy gets the fun part, which is actually bringing this to life and talking about some of the deals we've actually already enacted in the Bay of Plenty. So in terms of this fund, this was set up about 5 years ago. This came through from when we talk about our communities, Bay Trust, similar to Trust Waikato, we're trying to understand what the community challenges are. Every year we survey our communities over the last 10 or 15 years, and housing, doesn't matter where you are in the Bay of Plenty, is always one of the top 1 or 2 big challenges in our community, from some of the most unaffordable housing in New Zealand around Mount Maunganui, where I live, to some of the most poorest quality housing in terms of things like, in Murupara, Minganui, and some of those other communities we serve. So as a foundation, we've always had a view, we actually have to see how we can maximize our difference in terms of those community kind of challenges. And we realized we couldn't do that with our kind of granting budget. Our $7 to $9 million a year would not make a difference at all. What we realized, we've got a balance sheet. That's another tool to make a difference in the housing space. And we didn't call it a housing crisis. We called it a housing disaster. Because when we look at the consequences of the lack of safe, secure, and affordable housing in terms of kids' truancy, mental health, economic kind of growth, it is a fundamental biggest issue that we see in actually our communities. And as a foundation, we said we want to be involved into this and make a difference. But we also said, look, even if we invested 10% of our investment base into this, $20 million, that's actually not going to make much of a difference, right? What we need to do is create and catalyze a product that we can actually seek and attract more institutional capital in the future. And there's massive pools of capital to invest into housing in New Zealand. If you think about KiwiSavers alone, there's $140 billion sitting in KiwiSaver. Actually, how much of that is invested into housing stock in New Zealand? 2/5 of nothing, to be honest. Some of the small players like the Simplicity, Generate, Pathfinder are starting to do things, but the big funds are all just continuing to invest offshore. Yet housing is a really attractive investment asset class in its own right. It's the biggest investable asset class in New Zealand, yet our institutional investors are not investing. So how do we create a product that we can seed with philanthropic capital, so ourselves, Tech, Rotorua Trust, Trust Horizon. We also got council involvement and NZ Gift involvement. How can we create a product that we can show we can actually get a really strong track record of financial returns, because it's a really good investment, and make a meaningful impact in terms of our community. So focusing on building that typology and the tenure that the market's not delivering. Hamilton, I mentioned the Waikato region like Tauranga, plenty of the 3 to 4 bedroom houses getting developed on 400 square metre sections. Yet we've got a 2,000 unit shortage of 1 to 2 bedroom kind of duplexes, etc. in the Tauranga region alone. So how can we create a product that actually addresses those needs? And really fortunate in the Bay of Plenty region, we pulled together this fund working collaboratively with our key stakeholders. That fund, basically, we've got $60 million of equity checks in that fund. Fortunate that TCC, as we're conceptualizing this fund, we're selling off their pensioner units to KEO. And as part of the social license to sell those pensioner units, the commissioner said, we're going to invest that proceeds back into a housing solution. So we put this housing solution and said, rather than the council trying to do it themselves, and councils investing in housing is difficult in terms of political cycles. Housing's a 50-year kind of game. But it's also councils' balance sheets are actually strapped. Investing into this fund means we can leverage it with debt and also get other investors in the future to invest in the fund as well. And one of our key KPIs is to attract that KiwiSaver institutional investor into this fund as well. So we attracted those $60 million of debt. If we flick on to the next kind of slide, The key KPIs for this fund is basically 2 KPIs. It's to get that financial performance. Like, this fund is not going to work unless we get acceptable financial return. So we're targeting CPI plus about 400 basis points a year as a minimum. We believe that's an acceptable risk for adjusted return investing in residential housing. To achieve that, we also want to have a really positive impact, and this is where we're looking for those gaps in the market. So we're not doing the 3-4 bedroom homes in Papamoa. You know, we're doing really interesting things around license to occupy, build to rent, working with community housing providers, working with Māori iwi in terms of papakainga developments, and actually achieving that really good community impact at the same time. And it's really good timing for this because we've just released our second annual report, which is the first full year really of operations of the fund. So you can see we are achieving those financial metrics already in year 2, and we're actually delivering that kind of impact at the same time. Just flick on, we'll keep on going through this.
I've just had a chat with Robert too. We'll push out the time a bit further, so another 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay. Just try and go through this. We'll skip over this slide. That's a big diagram. We've set it up deliberately as a tax efficient pie structure. So a number of the investors, like ourselves being a foundation and the council, are tax exempt, but it also means it's a long-term fund that we can attract additional capital into that kind of fund at the moment. The other really interesting, unique thing about this fund is it's location specific. So, for example, Tauranga City Council, when they invest into the fund, they want to see their 20 million investment deployed within their city boundaries. And so we've had to develop a fund that makes sure the capital that's contributed from someone like TCC gets deployed in that region as well. But then the risk and the return of that investment for TCC is spread over the entire risk and return of the fund, which actually de-risks it from a council perspective at the same time. So I think at one stage we have 4 or 5 sets of lawyers working through this from a whole bunch of different perspectives. You know, it took about a year to kind of work through the legal mechanisms to make that work. This fund is also, if we skip to the next slide, is getting replicated around New Zealand. So Roy can probably touch base on this, but the Central Lakes region, Otago and Central Lakes, just about potentially looking to launch a very kind of similar fund. The Taranaki region is also looking at doing something kind of similar as well. So it's attracting some really good momentum around the kind of rest of the kind of country. And probably if we just skip on to the next slide, and then I'll hand over to Roy so he can kind of bring it to life. The really focus on now is deploying our capital, probably next year, looking to actually really go and attract further kind of capital in the fund. Now we've got the deal flow sitting there, and you can see how we're getting that financial return and the impact at the same time. And then Roy can do the fun stuff and actually bring this to life and talk about some of the deals that we've actually done.
You've done fun stuff. Alistair mentioned about the annual report. I've got some hard copies for people who like old school hard copies. There's also the digital copies available on our website, which is bophef.nz. If you'd like to refer to that later on. We're pretty proud of what we've achieved in the first couple of years. The fund has just become NAV positive. So in other words, we've gone through the initial sort of J curve that's typical with a fund like this, overcoming the setup costs while you're still in the process of making the initial investments. So we're pretty chuffed about that. And we've had our first profitable year, being our second year in operation. So just to try and bring to life, as Alistair said, what are we actually doing in this fund? So really, we're looking for any opportunity to partner with community-based organisations who have a potential housing project. So they've either got some land or they've got an idea, might be an iwi or a marae trust, might be a community housing provider, might be a council who's got some land but doesn't quite know what to do with it. Really, any community-based organisation who wants to see housing happen but is lacking capital. And we can come in, do our due diligence, and if we're comfortable that the project is aligned with our objectives, then we can either provide capital alone, and that can be either as an equity partner, or it can be as a development finance provider, depending on what's required for the particular circumstance. And we can also provide expertise. I mean, we are developers, so we can help people who maybe have lots of passion and want to see something happen, but maybe don't know how to make it happen, we can step in and help bring the project to life. So around the Bay of Plenty, we have partnered with councils, we've partnered with CHIPS, we're partnering with private developers actually in some instances, with smaller hapu, Maori land trusts, etc. And we've got a whole bunch of projects, as you will have seen from the presentation, underway already. First homes are complete. First families are now residing in our homes, which we're pretty happy with, considering we're only a couple of years in existence. Maybe one I wanted to point out in particular, we in Levers Road in Matua, a suburb of Tauranga, we were approached by a private developer some time back about a piece of land they had under control. They were lacking a bit of capital. They were looking for support to get a pretty traditional kind of development underway, just a build to sell. When we looked at the location, we felt there was an opportunity to do something more than just a traditional build and sell. So in the end, the fund ended up essentially contracting the developer to deliver quite a bespoke development for our purposes. And what we've done there is create a new product, if you like, called Homes Together, which is designed to cater to what we felt was a strong need in that particular suburb for smaller homes for people who, retirees, empty nesters, who want to stay in that suburb, but need to get rid of their big home that's expensive to maintain and well beyond their needs, and who are looking for something smaller, but currently there's just nothing available. So we took the plunge and developed this Homes Together product, launched it in the market via a press release just a few weeks back, actually about 3 weeks ago, and we were overwhelmed with responses. And actually the emails and things that we got from people were basically reflecting back to us the initial thesis. We had people saying, look, we've lived in Matua all of our lives, we want to stay here, but we've got this big home, we can't really stay here, but there's nothing for us in the suburb. So that's an example, I guess, of how we're trying to be a bit innovative using the capital that we have.
And just to clarify that model, so that's not just buying a smaller home. That's actually where we own the land. They pay a rent for the land. They're buying the capital improvement. So if they sold a $1 million house, which had a $500,000 mortgage, they could clear that. They could buy the improvements on top of the land for $300,000. There's a guaranteed confirmation that we're going to buy that back when they actually want to sell. And then they apply, we charge them a ground rent for the ground underneath it, which is adjusted by CPI. So it's kind of a different, more equitable model than the retirement kind of village model, we believe. So we can, that's part of this fund, is to try innovative concepts. And as Roy said, we had 60 expressions of interest within the first week of just issuing a press release. We haven't used real estate agents or anything at all. And we've had other people interested to replicate that model. So that's what this fund can do. We've deliberately designed it so it's not based on a single typology or tenure kind of model. We don't want to be dependent on government IRS kind of MSD contracts or anything like that. So we can kind of flex and work through when political government's going to change. We don't have to always go with the chips. We've got a QBank secured lending facility over the whole fund, so we can actually lend, effectively apply that to papakainga of development, where banks will never, apply that security because they can't get security over the land. Because the security is over our entire fund, we can do developments of Maori and iwi where they can't take security over the land. So quite an innovative kind of concept what we're doing, and it's getting really good traction.
And just in the interest of time, probably the only other one I want to use as an example would be Oporiki. Oporiki, I think, as everybody knows, is a fairly challenged town, housing-wise, a lot of deprivation there. So we were very keen to support better housing outcomes in Oporiki. We really spent a lot of time traveling and visiting, or traveling to and visiting Oporiki to try and really understand what was the right way for us to approach housing solutions that were appropriate for that town. And what we realised is a lot of external parties have come in with good intentions, and they've done various types of projects in Oporiki, but generally those have not worked. So we were very cautious, I guess, based on others' experience. But recognising that the average income in town is $13,000, I think, last time I checked, we were, I guess, laser focused on making sure that whatever we did do in the end was truly affordable. And when you've got, such low incomes, that is a massive challenge. In the end, we decided to get behind a developer who we feel is strongly aligned with our objectives of delivering truly affordable housing for people in need. And they are delivering with funding help from us a couple of different housing alternatives in Oporiki. And I guess it took a little bit of time for us to get our investment committee and board comfortable with what we were supporting there, because these are not beautiful homes, but these are sort of price appropriate homes. And that's something that I think we as a fund need to be prepared to do in order to deliver better housing for people who are truly in need, which is ultimately our impact objectives. So yeah, might leave it there, and I guess open it up for questions.
Okay, no, thank you. Open up for questions, comments. No.
Kia ora tātou. I'm just curious in terms of the availability for building papakainga. What's the formula for Māori-owned land? Have you dealt with that?
Yes, that's a very good question indeed. And we are engaged with a lot of different groups around the Bay of Plenty, around potential papakainga. And I guess it's our biggest frustration at the moment that we haven't got a project live yet. We did help to catalyse one in Whakatane. We went all the way through the process of helping stand the project up. We were going to be providing development funding. And then another local Māori trust realised that actually they could step in and actually provide the funding. So actually it was a bit of a win-win in the end. I think what we've found is there are a lot of marae trusts and other Māori land trusts who I guess have done a lot of work over the last few years getting consents in place based on the expectation that they would be able to tap into the funding that was until recently available from government sources, grant funding in particular. And now, of course, they're in a very unfortunate situation where they've got their planning done, they've even got their consents in place, but that funding has disappeared. We can provide development funding to a certain extent, but if there's no other capital, then that is proving quite difficult. So we're continuing to work with groups right across the region. I'm confident we will get our first one or two projects away in the not too distant future. But I think it is just a slower process really, and it's not driven. That's not driven from our side. It's really driven from the side of the parties that we're working with. But I guess to answer your question more directly, we can certainly provide, and we are very motivated to provide development funding to papakainga projects.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Mayor Axel.
Yeah, just really good work, and we've sort of Harvey, looking at you down the back, we've sort of had this in mind ourselves through Momentum, and the models you talk about are the ones, Mike, you referred to earlier too. So we haven't quite connected all the dots in one place as you have, but commend your work. Thank you.
Mayor Tim.
Yeah. Thank you. Great presentation. Concerned, Alistair, by your initial comment that despite it being a great model, KiwiSaver funds are still overwhelmingly flowing overseas. We know that, and their providers are looking for the best return on investment, obviously. But are you seeing any hope that might change? How do you make it? How do you make them more aware of it? That hey, you could actually get just as good returns with this.
I think it's a top down and a bottom up kind of approach. So I think it needs to come from the KiwiSaver members. So I've presented plenty of times and said, look, actually, if you're a KiwiSaver member and your KiwiSaver provider came to you in the future and said, do you want to allocate 2 or 5% of your KiwiSaver to building their houses of the typology and tenure with really good track record returns and impact, would you do it? And everyone pretty much unanimously in the room will put their hand up and say yes, because they actually understand housing. They understand the dynamics, the returns, the capital gains, the rental streams. What we're seeing is the boutique KiwiSaver providers, like the smaller ones like the Generate, the Pathfinder, Sam from Simplicity, etc. They're starting to move into the space because they recognize the opportunities here. But what we're not seeing is those big bank-dominated KiwiSaver schemes that, they can invest in their multi-manager offshore kind of funds. They can charge pretty exorbitant kind of fees on that and make really excessive margins without having much of an impact. So, we need to get some political momentum from the top pushing it down as well. We've had a number of discussions with politicians and they get this concept. And it's not just in housing we're talking about. It's just, if you talk about the infrastructure deficit in New Zealand, that's not going to be fulfilled by central or local government. We've got big pools of capital here. So how can we encourage them to do it? Offshore, Australia's superannuation schemes that generally invest 25-30% of their investments are locally in Australia. So how do we get some of that kind of momentum? I think it needs to come from the top. It's just we don't see those central government politicians thinking that this is a vote winner for them at this stage. But I think, if you talk about the challenges, our communities are facing, that's what we need to access. So in the UK, they had a Mansion House agreement where all the UK big pension plans agreed that they'd commit at least 5% of their funds to private investments within the UK within the next kind of 5 years. So I think you're seeing that kind of momentum starting to happen, and we're just putting together a policy ask for this upcoming election that we're going to go out and we'll spread it out to all our stakeholders. We've got plenty of contacts in central government across the political spectrum saying this is what we need to see. And this is an area where I think that the government could really put some pressure on. If Nicola Willis called all those CEOs of the KiwiSaver and said, if you want to have a social license to occupy, if you want to be a default KiwiSaver scheme, you need to start investing into some of our infrastructure in New Zealand. And that's not just housing, that's across the board. That's in the private equity space, the VC space, water, pipes, all that kind of side of things, because that's where the capital actually is. So we're doing our best, and we're going to put out some, more messages over the coming months to those kind of politicians to try and put more pressure on them there.
I just add a few comments as well. I've spent the last 12 years trying to activate money out of KiwiSaver and other institutional investors. It's been a hard road, to be honest. I don't think they feel really under any competitive pressure at all to date. But there are some wins coming. We brought New Zealand Super Fund into their first housing investment 10 years ago. And I think others are looking at that. We've just secured a mandate from an institutional investor for $50 million. It's coming into housing, not into this strategy, but into housing nonetheless. And that's kind of the first large institutional mandate into general residential housing in New Zealand. So it's a baby step, but the housing market is 10 times the size of the NZX. It's a very logical thing for institutions to invest in from a diversification and return perspective. But we've got to demonstrate the ability to deliver the returns that they require for their members. And historically, I think the other major problem has been liquidity. They're so used to having the ability to sell whatever they're invested in, whether it's stocks or bonds, at short notice, that housing presents a little bit of a challenge to them. But it's the same challenge that people are faced with internationally, and every other market around the world's got their minds around it. So I'm sure in time it'll happen here.
Okay, I've got 2 mics. Okay. Mike Montgomery.
Oh, thanks. You said that some of the seed funding for your equity fund, the TCC stuff, came from selling their pensioner housing. Can we just explore that a bit? Because we're in the same position. We have quite a lot of that. And I mean, you're recycling capital that's in affordable housing into another fund for affordable housing. Is the leverage there that you're just better at it than us? Is that why we should be considering that?
We did kind of run a little bit of argument like that. I think, local government has got all these other kind of pressures. You know, as a foundation, we're not experts in housing and development finance and all that kind of stuff. So we went to the market before we went with New Ground Capital. We went to the market. We had 7 fund managers that experts in housing pitched to us. We selected New Ground Capital because we're like, we want to find the best that actually understand how to deliver housing developments over the kind of long term. So my kind of view is that housing and 3-year political cycles don't really kind of mix. We've seen this across our region. We've seen, I don't know if you're across what's happening in Rotorua at the moment, where there's a whole bunch of issues with their pensioner stock because it hasn't been invested in over the long term, because there's always other pressures in terms of what you do with those returns. We're going to use it to reduce rates, etc. So I think it's really hard for councils to look after housing long term. It's much better, we think, to be put into a separate structure that's solely focused on housing, doesn't have other interests or anything, can look through the long term and actually really deliver that and get the experts that are actually doing this. So we don't propose to do it ourselves. It's like, let's actually find the fund manager, the experts that do this, and it can deliver really long term housing impact and financial returns at the same stage. And I think that argument holds true across most of the councils that I've seen. But it's not to say that councils aren't really good partners, right? Councils quite often actually will have the land. So we'd be very open to, we're already having discussions where they'd put in the land for development, we'd put in the equity for the development, we'd create an SPV, we'd actually, put debt on top of that development. And then over the long term, we can actually, both, achieve the financial returns or impact, or we can buy the land off them. So I think councils are key partners here. We've got really good, strong relationships with all the councils, but actually they're not the best place to actually deliver that housing stock. And I don't think they're very well placed to long-term to own that housing stock, because you might have a lot of expertise around the table in this kind of council round, but what happens in 3 years' time?
We should probably also say, though, that this type of fund is not necessarily a silver bullet for the challenges around the council-owned pensioner housing. That is a problem, obviously, that every council around the country are most grappling with, and it's very difficult to solve, even with a fund like this, with a committed capital base.
Yeah, Mike, and then Mayor Axel.
Yeah, mine was Mike's question as well, but I'll just go on there a little bit. I guess at the moment too, there's so much for councils to focus on. So I really hear what you're saying, and it's something that some of us would have talked about leading into last October. And you get into the reality of this, and I know you're in for the long haul, but there's so much happening that you want to do some things, and it's the priority of those saying that we're just about to put a property strategy together, and this thinking will be part of that. But in terms of selling it to Karakia Order, do you know what the outcome is? And you shouldn't have to know, because you the council sold the assets and redirected the revenue. But in terms of, because this is a conversation that Waipa will be having, and a concern is, hey, how are the tenants, the pensioners, are going to be better off, worse off? That'll be a big part of decision making.
Yeah, as I say, it's excuse me, it's obviously a huge challenge. I think Karakia Order would probably be off the table now, I would say, as an option, because they're more in the business of sort of selling down their portfolio than investing more capital. In Rotorua, I think it's a merge that Alice is involved in as well, have stepped up and partnered with the council there in terms of the redevelopment of some of their pensioner housing. Don't know that that's necessarily fully over the line yet. And all of the projects that I've looked at around the country in this respect, they're all kind of stalled. People are still looking for the right solution. So, I just think we haven't got it yet either.
I think that was a unique point of time where KO was aggressively trying to build up their portfolio. They were paying really good money. It was in Tauranga, so that land was worth a hell of a lot of kind of money as well. And we knew, in working with the council, we knew we could get the money out of that and reinvest back and actually deliver more units effectively than they had before. But it was kind of a unique point of time. The council's biggest issue is is when you kind of look at it, it's valued, that housing stock, the pensioner housing stock is valued at market value on their books. It's not valued at its discounted kind of cash flows, but it's only really truly worth its discounted cash flows. So council keep on trying to sell them, and it's like, well, actually, if you want to hold it as elderly pensioner stock, the only way we would actually purchase it is on DCF valuations, which is probably 1/10 of what it's worth in your kind of book. So there's all those kind of dynamics that, like, you know, if we saw Whakatane, they ended up selling theirs to TCHT a number of years ago. And I think that's actually taken a big noose around their necks off. And they're just like, they actually just took the kind of hits and just sort of started moving on, going, it's just distracting us from our core business at some stage. As long as we can guarantee it's going to stay some kind of that level of same level of units going forward, if not growing them, then they're comfortable with that. But yeah, it's really hard discussion for council.
Well, the Whakatane one's an interesting example because although they got it off the council books and moved it over to Tauranga Community Housing Trust, but actually now it's a headache for them. And they are struggling to work out how they can redevelop that housing portfolio, make it better because it's pretty old and tired. So it's kind of just moved the problem, really.
It's kind of been like 50 years in that making, right? In terms of actually not reinvesting back into them and stuff, and got to a stage where it's like, actually, someone's going to take the hit, and it's not going to be our fund, it's not going to be a community housing. You know, it needs the councils and ratepayers to some extent, and they just kind of will have to take the hit and move it into a different, better solution.
Just my last comment on that around 3-year cycles and where the money can go is for instance, it's ring fenced, so it sits outside the ratepayer. All money that's generated goes back into the stock, so it sort of takes that political element out of it.
And most of the founding shareholders in this fund have committed that the returns that they're going to make from this fund, they're going to reinvest back into this fund to achieve their housing strategy kind of long term. They do have the flexibility; they can kind of take the returns out, but because they're philanthropic impact kind of base, this is kind of our housing strategy. So if we make a 10% of return out of this fund, we'll just invest it straight back into this kind of fund and kind of bring it in the future. But yeah, I think the big benefit is like, because Bay Trust is a little bit like a council, we've got all these other millions of priorities and that we just don't have the time. Whereas Roy and his team, the sole focus they do is housing 24/7.
Mayor Axel.
Yes, and I make the point also around councils as landlords, and we're lucky to have Vanessa sitting at the back of the room, who speaks
He's looking nervous,
like a fountain of truth on all matters government. M had some years ago decided that they had no appetite to change the view that every landlord with a qualifying tenant could receive income-related rent support except councils. I'm just wondering, Vanessa, whether, speaking for government as you do, you've got a mind to review that position.
Through the chair. Thank you, Mayor Axel. Fortunately, I'm not the only person in the room who likes to speak on behalf of government, and in fact is mandated to. I don't know of any changes afoot there, but I'm happy for any of my central government colleagues may know more than me.
So we've got Sarah online. Would you like to comment or respond, Sarah? You're on mute.
I would like to get some clarity and come back to you. My understanding is there is some complexity around CCOs and individual tenant arrangements, but could you give me a few minutes and I will come back to you if the conversation could just carry on in the meantime. Sorry for that. I don't have the answer right now.
I think to be more helpful, you'll need more than a few minutes. I don't honestly, I don't actually understand government's aversion to an eligible tenant having the additional criteria of the nature of the landlord as a complicating or even an eligible factor. So it is I did hear, I'm sorry, I don't recall her name now, but the last MHUD person we had here in the last traineum talked about a government view at that time that the income related rent support was an ineffective mechanism by which to support those that were eligible, and they were thinking of something else. That's 3 years ago, and I've not seen what that something else is, so it would be useful to have an update, Sarah, because councils are now in a vexed position with existing stock on hand and a government that appears troubled by council's role in the pensioner housing space. Thank you.
So Sarah, yeah, there's more time to do that. And once you've got a response, if you can send that to Lyndall and she will get it out to all those around the table. Okay, I'll just finish up with one final question. Given what has been in place, close to 3 years now, the equity fund, is there two? Any particular learnings since its establishment, and is there anything different you would do?
There's always learning. Essentially, the first year we had we had another fund manager that was looking after the impact, as well as New Ground Capital that was looking after the deal. So we consolidated all that into one. I think we have built quite a complex structure long term. So because everyone wanted to have their capital initially deployed in their own region, so Rotorua Trust wanted to see it in Rotorua, we had to build a model that that capital they could see deployed in the region. But then it gets really interesting when actually, what if you exit that development in a couple of years' time? Then do we have to wait a certain amount of time and redeploy it back in? And it gets more and more complex the longer you see that going forward. And so that's one of the things that we want to look at over the next year or two. Is how do we simplify that structure? And also a structure like that with really strong founding shareholder rights is not going to be that appealing to getting institutional investment in the future. I think we've realized a lot of this at the start, but it's just a learning evolution curve in terms of getting that right optimum structure that can deliver that local impact, aligning with the founding shareholder views, but actually not overcomplicate things for other additional investors in the future would be probably one of the learnings. It takes a while to get some of these deals done. I think Roy's probably more impatient than me, which is quite interesting. But I think we've done a good job getting 10 deals in the first full year of operation. We timed this market really well because as we were starting to deploy capital, the New Zealand building, housing market was really pulling back. So the timings worked for us, but it still takes a lot of time, especially in the Māori iwi space in terms of having those conversations. It's not just a short, you can pull a deal together within a couple of months. It's more like a year to pull a deal together. So it's taking probably a little bit longer than we thought to deploy this capital, but we're still reasonably comfortable with the timing. Roy, from your side of things?
Probably the only thing I'd add really is that, I think in the Bay of Plenty, they really did do the hard yards in terms of a very long, comprehensive co-design and structuring process. We're working with Toi Foundation around the stand-up of a new fund for Taranaki, and likewise with Otago Community Trust and Central Lakes Trust for a new fund for Otago. Both those funds are coming together right at the moment, and they're much quicker processes now that the hard yards have already been done. So I think it doesn't have to be a 2 or even 3-year co-design process as it was in the Bay of Plenty. These things can be stood up much quicker now that we know how to do it.
And we're open, it's a Bay of Plenty Housing Equity Fund, but we've had discussions with founding shareholders, in terms of, I'd like to see some opportunity rather than creating cookie-cutter duplication of resources and, having a number of these funds. For me, it'd make a lot more sense to have an upper central North Island bigger fund. The bigger you can get this fund, the more liquidity you get into the fund, the more it's likely to attract institutional investors in the future as well. So, for example, if the Waikato funders or something came to us and said, look, we'd be interested in doing something together, we'd be very open to having discussions with that and all funders as well. Go, what does that look like? And I think our founding shareholders in the Bay of Plenty would be going, actually, we realise we can see our initial capital is deployed in our region, but if we really want to attract big institutional pools of capital, we need to be 4 or 5 times that size and operating at scale. And I think that upper North Island, the Bay of Plenty, the Waikato and Auckland, that's the majority of New Zealand these days. So if we can pull a fund together that looks after that combined region, that's when we'll get the size and scale and liquidity that we need to really take this to the next level.
Okay, no, thanks very much.
Is that 20 minutes?
So there's nothing further. So no, thank you both for preparing the presentation, but also coming along today, presenting and responding to the wide range of queries that members have. I have to say I do like your impact dashboard, and I like, as an example, the estimated people expected to be housed per $1 million of debt and equity. So it just gives a bit of a feel in terms of, fine, we talk about big figures, but actually what does it mean in terms of, for every million invested or debt, how many people end up in a house. So thank you very much for that. And members, note on the last slide of the presentation, both Alistair and Roy have indicated more than happy for anyone to reach out for them if you want to have some further discussions around this whole concept. So again, thanks very much, guys.
Go the Chiefs.
Yes. What I was going to do was just take a quick 5-minute break, comfort stop, and then we'll come back and quickly move through those outstanding items. Oh, I better have a mover and seconder for receipt of the presentation. Thanks, Mayor Mike. Okay, thanks, Maria. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we'll reconvene at 10:02.